Okay, we're going to start the disassembly of the 3152. We've done a lot to it already, but this particular motor, we've replaced the head on it. I'm going to pull it apart. We'll demonstrate. We're going to pull the pistons out of it. We're going to pull the sleeves out of it and just do a rebuild on this engine. So here we go. One of the things I wanted to show you, got the oil pan off, but right here in this cavity on the dipstick side of the motor, I had oil dripping out of that hole. When the tractor was running, I didn't notice it when it's cold, but after it got warm and the oil was warm, I had a substantial leak right there. And I just want to show you a couple of things. There's a bolt right there that goes into the block. Holds the oil pan on. And when I went to take the oil pan off, you notice, see the light, I hope you can see it, through the bolt hole. Anyway, that hole right there is the hole where the oil come from, or actually, it would have been this side for sure, yeah. And it's directly to the crankcase, so it had a good reason to leak oil. The bolt was missing. So I was worried about this rear seal. When I pulled the motor off the bell housing, the clutch and the bell housing just dry as a bone. This rear seal is obviously not leaking. It's that. So that's a good thing. No matter how long you work on these, any machine, there's always something that'll surprise you. Like that bolt being missing. I'm glad that's it, and I'm glad I feel confident that was my oil problem. So I'm gonna get these oil pickup tubes out of the way and we start pushing the pistons out. I'll show you something here that when I took the nut off, this tab was broken. That's not uncommon, but it absolutely needs to be repaired. This is this little tab on this bracket where it bolts to the main bearing, and that holds this pickup tube down inside the screen. I've taken these apart, and this tube has fractured, and it sucked air. The oil pressure fell off and burnt the motor up. So this tab is a crucial, as you can see, that's broke. It's broke from vibration. I always reinforce it, put a little heavier piece on there. So I'll fix this one before I put it back together. I'm pulling this front cover off so I can get the front main off. I guess I'll wind up taking the crankshaft completely out of it. I don't think it's necessary because the motor held 75 pounds of oil pressure, and I know somebody's been in it, and I think they did an end frame, but they did it poorly. So I guess it makes sense to check everything. It's too much work not to get back to it. Voila. Now you can take this little piece. I always like to make sure they're absolutely flush right there. This is a separate component. Then the oil pump can come off. You can't get the tube off. And you certainly couldn't torque the main cap back down without taking this off. This is the supply line that supplies the oil to the filter. And then from the filter throughout the block. But it's trapped. You have to put them on there together. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this gear off right here. Give me access to the bolts on the pump. Got a C-clip on the front of it. The pump, of course, is not timed. It's a gear. It's a gear-driven pump. I'm gonna lay the clip in my drive gear in my tray. Now, I can easily get to these bolts that holds the pump on. Easy breezy. Easy breezy when you do it in the right procedure. These bolts, I always like to use 6-point sockets on them. They're very shallow for gear clearance. So they're special bolts that go in that pump, and you want to make sure, always put blue Loctite on when I put them back in as well. Gives me a handle. If you'll notice on these engines, the 1, 2, and 3 are numbered on the rods and the caps, and they match. I'll confirm the numbers and the caps of which side of the block they go on before I put them back in or put new pistons on them. So we'll get this thing apart. Always confirm. Never take for granted that it's right when you take it apart. Know that it's right when you put it back together. These bolts, they're not torque to yield. In other words, they have a torque spec for them. And a lot of people reuse them. Most of the time I don't. I usually replace them with new ones. They're not that much money. The bearings don't look that bad. This is the closest one to the pump. The rod that'll be the most severely damaged if you've got an oil issue or probably the one furthest away from the pump. So, jury's still out on rod bearings. But if you've got them out, you might as well replace them. That's my opinion. So on this cylinder, we don't have a counterweight bob to have to contend with. That rod cap looks pretty good as well. This bearing actually looks good as well. Real tight in the caps. And if you'll look right here, I'll wipe it off. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a 20. That means that crankshaft is 20 thousandths undersized. So this bearing 20 thousandths oversized. It's got a date on it, 3/8. No, it says 3-1B. Excuse me, that's not a date. And it's a Beepco bearing. This one has a counterweight bob. So we'll rotate it. We'll let it do some of the work for us by pushing the piston down. Alright, as far as the crankshaft, I'm gonna push it. Look. Knock it on down the rest of the way. Pick up my bearing. That's the first one. This slipped out. Beepco 20. I'll show you something on this rod bolt, kind of cool. Typically, most sets are not this way. The rod bolt has this oval head on it. It has a flat right here. But if you'll notice, it's got a cut on it right there. That cut and these bolts will only go in the rod with this reveal on the main body side. This has got to go away from the crankshaft for them to fit. So I've kept these bolts throughout the process oriented to the hole they come out of too. And it's got that reveal on them. That's not particularly normal, but it is kind of cool. It's a nice bolt. All right, we're gonna turn the motor back over. Now, I don't see anything that's screaming at me I'm bad. The all three, none of them look perfect. But clearly, this one, compression was all three a little low. These two, this is the best cylinder we had, weakest, and in the middle. After we'd run it, we had 350 pounds on this one, maybe, and 320 on that one, and 250 on this one, or 225, with the valves working and the piston going. And after we ran it, I'd hope that would improve if it had a ring stuck or something that I couldn't see. But obviously the rings were not stuck. So these are chrome lined sleeves in this engine. The rings that are in it, I don't know what they are, but you cannot run a chrome sleeve and a chrome ring. They'll never seat. They'll always use oil, have poor compression, that sort of thing. Chrome sleeves with a cast iron ring or malleable iron ring, they'd work fine. One of the things about this motor too is these sleeves are slightly recessed, and there's three types of sleeves. One's just called stovepipe. They have no reveal on them at all, and I don't know what these are. But I suspect they have a reveal on them. I just suspect they're within spec when you read them. They can't be more than 9 thousandths deep, and one of these is like 7 thousandths deep. And the others are 3 to 6. So if we pull these out, we'll check our reveal and make sure we get the right sleeves to go back in it. One of the things you do on these motors, usually when I do sleeves, I let the machine shop press them in and out. I've actually got a porta pony trying to be able to bring more of these back to life by not having to farm out that labor. I've made a plug and it's got a reveal on it. It should fit right inside that sleeve. I carried a brand new sleeve with me and made it to fit, and it does. It fits perfect. and it's small enough so this will come through the block. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this plug in the bottom, put a rod through, put a power pony hydraulic press on it, and I'll pull these sleeves out. They're dry sleeves, and these original sleeves were friction fit, which means they're tight and they're hard to come out. And whoever put these in, there's no telling what kind of sleeve sealer they put on them too. I've had them, I've seen the shop break them loose and it popped like a gunshot almost when they break loose to come out. We'll see how these do and see if I can do it or not. We'll see. Okay, everybody. We're in the process of pulling these sleeves out. This is the first time I've ever done it. I've always carried it to the machine shop, done it in the past, but in order to save some of the money and to make some of these tractors come back to life, I thought I'd attempt it myself. I don't think it's going to be that hard to do. I'll show you underneath as well. There's the cup. Hope you can see that pretty well. The rod's in, the cup looks seated properly. So I'm gonna give her a shot. See how she looks. I've got these crank journals. They're perfect. So I got them protected just in case I buff them or something. We'll give her a shot. See how she does. Looks like it's coming out fine. I was expecting it to make a noise. No noise. Not complaining. Alright, that's the end of the stroke. I hold up on the rod, run down on my washer, my bolt. Get about 3 inches each stroke. I think that sleeve about 9 inches long. Here we go. Alright, I'm in the process of I've already put 2 sleeves in. I want to show you guys the install of one of these units as it goes together. I don't want to make sure I got everything off my cylinder. I think I do. A lot of people just put a little bit of oil on these and slide them in. I actually use a sleeve adhesive, which is old school, but old school's good. If you ever have a flange crack on one, flange being this part right here, if it cracks and breaks off and they're not adhered in the block, now that adhesive will wipe off as this cylinder sleeve goes in the block. So it basically will be coated all the way around. Yeah, make sure you hang on to them. I always have a fear of dropping one. It's kind of like putting piston rings on. Sure don't want to have a problem at this point with these components. So, there we go. These sleeves now used to be this harder to press in. I always carried a machine shop to have them done, and I've gotten to a point where the fit is not as severe as they used to be. Now, find my parts. Here we go. This is my piston that I made to pull my sleeves out with. I also use them to reinstall it, and I'll show you a little trick I do just as we get to the bottom. I'll do. This bar, this threaded rod, is attached to a flat bar that bridges the bottom of the block. It runs across. I'll show it to you when we get going here. I'll get some tension on it. Okay, my piston's seated well. This bar is not. There we go. Patience and checking, double checking is a good thing. We'll put just a little bit of tension on it now. Pushing it in, see my piston coming out. Takes about 3 or 4 strokes, straight up and down with the engine block. How most people do it when you by yourself. Sideways. Seems to work. I can get to both ends and I have to lay on the floor. You hear this pump's really not struggling, but I assure you, you'd never be able to deal with this without this hydraulic helper. As it's going in, that sealer wipe off and it would go right up the side of the sleeve. This was definitely the tightest one I've had thus far. You're never too old to learn. And pulling these sleeves, I'd always sent these blocks out to the machine shop to have the sleeves pulled, but I do so many, and I had just about everything I needed to do them myself and to save some money and give me the opportunity to bring some of these tractors back to life without breaking the bank. I bought a few pieces and made a few pieces to pull these sleeves. Now, I had a problem. I showed y'all about how we pulled them and how we put them in. And I'm going to show you a problem I had with the last sleeve I installed. I had my pump setting up here to push the sleeve into place. These two went in no problem. I got to the third one. I got right to the last, and my ram, my piston, the piston, I call this the piston, and this is an old sleeve that I pulled out. It's got a step in it right there. That step is machined to fit inside of this sleeve perfectly. It goes in there flush. And this dimension is just a few thousandths smaller than the exterior bore, so it can come through the block to pull this sleeve out. And this is the flange, of course, at the top of the block where the cylinder head would be. But I pulled them out, no problem, and I was using this component to push them back in with. And I'd even gone as far when I'd get them down, and keep in mind, there are sleeves now. These are interference fit. You got to press them in, press them out. I've been told, and I've heard there's some sleeves now that are called a slip fit. The sleeves that I purchased for this motor certainly was not that. I had to pull them out, and I had to press them in. And I'd use this, and I'd get down toward the end, and I'd actually made a piece that I could slip around my rod like so, put this back on top and press them in the rest of the way, and this would be the stop, in other words. But I had a problem mentally. Was it in the center of the sleeve? I wanted it to be in the center of the sleeve. So the third one was a little harder to do than normal. And also, I'm going to show you one other thing. The original sleeves have just ever so slight chamfer, just a slight bit, and that's so the rings will go in. There's nothing, they're totally square on the bottom. That's why my piston, my ram, my pusher, work great pulling them out. Now, the new sleeves that I purchased to put in the motor, I'm going to show you. I'll walk you right over here. I hope you people can see this bevel right here, right there, and right there. It's, 4 or 5 thousandths of an inch deep. The bevel there, you see it on both of those. And because of that bevel on the top of the sleeve, I'm going to show you my heartache. I had this sleeve in to right here. And there's that bevel. I broke it. There's this bevel. And I'd had my ram on it. Well, because the step is so small between here and here, because you got to clear the bore, that give even less surface area for this to push on. So what it did, it spread this and ruptured this sleeve. So I had to pull it back out. And you see how nice it fits in the bottom? Fits in there great, and it's square, and I had no problem pulling them out, and they were relatively hard to pull out. So, with that being said, I ordered a new sleeve 2 days later, got it. And I made another part. I made a part that this is the diameter of the cylinder, interior cylinder bore, and it'll go right in that cylinder, no problem. And then this flange here, when I put it in a new cylinder, it's more than ample surface all the way around the flange, so it can push these sleeves in. I guess the moral of the story is you live and learn. Never too old to stop learning. So I had to purchase another cylinder sleeve, and I'm going to show you something on the replacement sleeve that I ordered. And the frustration of a tractor mechanic, there's the number on this particular sleeve. And the number of this is actually on the same numbers on the box of the new one that I got. But I want to show you something with this new sleeve. This edge right here is square, totally square. I believe that if these sleeves had been configured like this sleeve, I wouldn't have had any problem. But because of variants and manufacturers, and of course both sets of sleeves are within tolerance, they're fine. It's just you never stop learning. So, and you never can have too many parts. You can't buy one of these, you'd go broke. I just made the round one, made a square one, drilled a hole and welded them together so I could keep them together. And then that's my hole for my rod to go through. And it worked out perfect. So I'm going to put this one in. I think I'd showed you guys the other day about the piston rings. And of course the pistons, the number of the piston goes in the block away from the camshaft. And the manufacturer of this oil ring here, they basically want you to, there's a gap. There's several things goes on with this. There's a gap, right? See this little gap in the bottom, and there's a little gap in the top. And you see that one particular piece where the point is right there? And the point is the only one like that. They want it directly over the wrist pin. Then I place my other ring gaps. I'll put one to that side of this wrist pin. I'm gonna take this one, I'm gonna turn it, and I'm gonna put it just to the other side of the wrist pin. And you do that because the pistons rock. You'd like to think they didn't, but they do. They rock. So over the wrist pin, it's the least amount of rock. If it was over here, you'd be rocking way more. So that's the most stable place to place your rings. We'll put the ring squeezer on, put this last piston in the hole.